Alrighty guys, thanks for joining me on another one of my videos. Now let's get right into it. Who runs the show? It's Transport Canada and Nav Canada. Canada's airspace. Canada has 7 classes of airspace. Each one has its own rules about the types of aircraft that can use it and the communications equipment pilots need to use. Nav Canada is there across them all, providing air traffic control and flight information services so pilots can get to their destinations safely and efficiently. Now, they let the members of the Hang Gliding and Paragliding Association of Canada enjoy the airspace as well. We must prove that we know the rules, and then we must continue to play by the rules. That is what this is about. So, as long as we are behaving ourselves, we will continue to be self-regulated. Alright, one of the names of the airspace we do want to be flying in is Class G. Another airspace we do want to be flying in is Class E. I'll give you a bit more information on that one shortly. And the airspace that you're flying in during your training and when you get signed off as a P2 pilot are primarily in Class F airspace. Now, a little bit more information about Class G airspace. It is general airspace, it is uncontrolled airspace, and generally G starts from the ground upwards. Okay guys, on this next slide here, go ahead and stop the recording for a second and take a really close look at the Class G airspace. It's on the ground and it goes upwards, but also I want you to pay attention as to what's around it or what's above it. This is really important that you hang on to this. Take a snapshot if you like. Well, after you've studied that last image for a while, you'll probably have realized that there's a lot of Class E airspace around the Class G airspace. Well, yes, this is the airspace that we use to do our cross-country flights in. And of course, you need your Hagar to be able to use this airspace. Alrighty, Class F airspace, special use airspace. Most of our PG sites are Class F, as previously mentioned. Now, the interesting thing about this is that pilots of all sorts will notice something about our Class F airspace, and we're going to get into that very shortly. We're going to show you on a chart how to read this. Now, before I get into that, we need to talk a little bit about the airspace we want to avoid. Class B, Class C, Class D, and Class A. These are what? They are controlled airspaces, all right? Now, you've seen on the previous slide that Class E is controlled, just not as much as these. Yeah, that was a bit dramatic. Okay, so you're asking, why would we want to avoid these airspaces? Well, first of all, we're not powered. If we don't like the situation we're in, we can't just power up and get out of there. Second of all, we would need some special equipment. Let's take a look at that. First, you would need a transponder. It's a very important piece of gear that is in every single fixed-wing aircraft. They let airport towers and other planes flying in IFR, which stands for Instrument Flight Rules, know who and where you are. To operate in Class A, B, C, or D, you will need a transponder and an altitude encoder. It's going to be pretty tough to wear one of these on your arm while flying your paraglider. Besides, the battery to run it is quite heavy. Alright, the transponder sends signals from the plane to the ground. It also sends ground signals to the plane. It's a communication device to let everybody know where everybody is so everybody is safe all the time. Now there's another piece of gear that you will need to fly in the 4 airspaces listed above. You will need a professional air band radio, not to be confused with the ham radios that we're currently using out there right now. And you better make darn sure you know how to use that radio or somebody is going to give you a whipping. Alright, enough of that. The radio spectrum between 118 and 135.975 megahertz is used for air-ground communications in the Aeronautical Mobile Service. Again, check with your fixed-wing aircraft schools to find out where to get the air band radio course. You're going to need a license for that radio. Okay, let's take a closer look at airspace in the US. So, very much like Canadian, 18,000 feet and above is Class A airspace up to 60,000 feet. B is the upside down wedding cake. These are huge international airports, otherwise known as aerodromes. And Class C, same idea, large airports, extremely controlled. And Class D, primarily used for military air bases. So let's take a little bit closer look now at Class D. Okay, getting back to airspace. Class D airspace is controlled airspace and generally exists around medium-sized airports that extends from the surface to an altitude of 3,000 feet above ground level, but the exact size and shape of this space is dependent on the local airspace management needs. Now that we've spent some time talking about the airspace that we do not fly in, let's spend some more quality time on the airspace we do fly in. So the airspace we fly in is regulated, the launch is signed off, and so is the landing zone. Interestingly enough, other aircraft that are flying VFR can come and fly in our area as well. We do have a designation to the airspace in this area, and we're now going to get into more detail of what this is all about. In most cases, all paragliding sites in Canada operate as Class G airspace. You'll notice that when you start looking at the aeronautical charts that you'll notice that Class G is sometimes below 700 feet and Class E is above that. We will get into some of these examples during this video. Another example of G and E separation is where it happens at 1,200 feet. And yes, even at 2,200 feet is sometimes where G and E separate. Now I can hear you asking, don't you have to have Hagar to fly in Class E airspace? Normally, the answer is yes, but in this case, around our flying sites, we get a designation. You want to know what it is? The designation is called a CYA. I'll tell you more about that in a minute, but a CYA denotes that the airspace parcel becomes Class F airspace, which is what? It's called Special Use Airspace. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our flying sites. Alrighty, so for anybody watching from outside the country, we in Canada here have a really great flying site called Woodside Mountain, in fact, and we're going to take a closer look at the CYA at Woodside Mountain. Okay, here we are zoomed in on the CYA, surrounded by the magenta thatched line. You can see that it says CYA and a number and some letters behind it inside the CYA. Let's take a closer look as to what that means. Okay, there you see the first two letters are CY. That means that you are inside Canada. That next letter we come to beside the CY is an A. That equals advisory. So pilots from other areas can be heading over and see that there's an advisory here. The next thing we see show up is a 3-digit number. In this case, it's 186. What that means is it's the name of the area in British Columbia, and in this case, it's Dixon Lake. You can see by the white arrow up top there, that is where Dixon Lake is. So pilots that are entering the area, they can look up as they're flying, they see where the water is, and they say that's the edge of the CYA. So if you're a pilot coming in on a Cessna or a Piper and you're new to the area, you've now identified that you're in Canada, you've identified that there's an advisory, you've identified that it's Dixon Lake is the area for the CYA, but we don't know what we're advising yet. We need a little bit more information. Oh, and just so you know, as we're getting past this 186 here, if you do see a number between 101 and 199, you're in BC. Okay, so now I'm going to draw your attention to the Designated Airspace Handbook. This is a PDF that you can get off the internet for free. Go ahead and look it up and download it. And here we see an entire page in the handbook dedicated to this CYA. Here where the arrow is now pointing, you can see that the CYA goes from the surface all the way up to 6,000 feet. It used to be 6,500, now it's 6,000. Here you can notice that the time of designation is continuous daylight hours. Now this is interesting. The rules for Class G airspace apply when the area is active, which we now know is daylight hours. When not active, the rules for the applicable surrounding airspace apply. Okay, getting back to the chart, we can see there's an A after that 186. That stands for acrobatic. The next letter we get to is a T. That lets other pilots that are flying through or over the area know that training is going on inside the CYA. And the last letter we get to is an H. In this case it stands for hang gliding, which also covers paragliding as well. And that is the designation in which we get to fly in continuously throughout all daylight hours. Alrighty, so here are all of the letters that could show up at the end of the CYA, letting you know of what's going on inside of that CYA. So we now know that this is operating as Class G uncontrolled airspace, and it's designated as Class F special use airspace when in use. Okay, so on this page you're going to see all the different provinces and the numbers associated with them. You're also going to see some more information behind the CY. So we've talked about the CYA. Now let's talk about other CY designations. Okay, so here on the bottom right hand corner of the screen, or the southeast corner of the CYA, we see a blue circle with CYR in it. What the heck is that, you might be asking? Alrighty, CY equals Canada, R equals restricted. It's actually denoted as Class F airspace. Class F airspace is special use airspace. Any Class F zone will be designated either CYR, CYD, or CYA. CYR stands for restricted. CYD means danger, usually used for CYR areas over international waters. This one has a height of only 1,100 feet, but even if you think you are going to clear it, it's better to go around it rather than over it. We don't need phone calls coming in. It will avoid a call to the HPAC, local schools, and possibly a personal greeting when you land. So inside the designated handbook, we see the CYR 138 belongs to Kent Mountain, BC, near Agassiz. And here we see that the designated altitude is surface to 1,100 feet above ground level. And this one is continuous as far as the time of designation goes. Why? Well, it's a federal prison that's underneath that CYR. And if for whatever reason you happen to have a really important question you need to ask, go ahead and call the warden at Kent Mountain Institution, and there's the phone number. Alrighty, and the last point on this page, in regards to this designation, no person shall operate an aircraft within the area described unless the flight has been authorized by the user controlling agency. Now we know it's probably highly unlikely you're going to fly with a chart in your lap, and there's definitely no blue circle on the ground, so let's give you some points as to where that CYR actually is. Okay, so focusing on the red arrow, that's approximately where the Woodside launch is. When you thermal up a bit, look back to the north, you'll see the tower. And once you get down to the end of the ridge, you will be on top of Agassiz Mountain. Alrighty, I now draw your attention to the highway number 7, which is Lougheed Highway. Notice it's still inside the blue circle. And finally, right down the very bottom where it meets up with the CP rail, that is the edge of the blue circle that you now know the dimensions of. Okay, so go ahead and open up Google Maps, zoom down into the area, and take a look as to where you think that edge of the blue circle is. Alrighty guys, so I was actually going to put in this part of the video all the Bridal Falls information, which is on the other side of the valley. You can see the CYA over there as well. But I'm realizing now I'm over 14 minutes in this video, so let's get right into the Class C information that's somewhere there in the middle of the valley. I need to point this out to you as well. Okay, so you got your CYA, which is Woodside, designated as Class F. You've got a CYA over at Bridal Falls, is also designated as Class F, that you can go up to 8,000 feet over there. You got these sections in the middle that are Class G, and you've got Class E that shows up at 9,000 feet above the Class G area. But let's now focus on that Class C area, which is 6,500 to 8,500, which we absolutely must not fly into. Okay, so a quick refresher. For Class C, to enter into it, you must have your airband radio and license and know the frequency of the airport tower or pilot-only frequency for that area. And remember, for Class B, C, and D, you need confirmed clearance. It's that simple. Okay, so you've got yourself a good cross-country day, a good 2.8 laps rate, and you're enjoying some great height. You come down the end of Bridle, down to Gloria, maybe over to Elk. You get your height, and you go for your crossing. So you start heading over towards Woodside, and you notice just as you're about to cross Yale Road, you're thinking, wow, you know what? Hold it. I'm not really quite below 6,500 feet. I need to change my route slightly, and you need to start heading towards the bridge. Once you are indeed below 6,500 feet, by all means, head back towards Woodside, enjoy the rest of your flight over there, and either climb back up once you get to Woodside, or you can land at the Riverside landing zone. Nevertheless, here's another alternative route that you can take for your comfort and your enjoyment and your safety. Alrighty, so this is exciting. Now we're going to go into a little bit of Class E airspace that's just northwest above our CYA. Okay, as we know, Class E is controlled. You need to let them know that you're there because there is air traffic in the area, especially during the season where fires are around. Okay, so this is just an example for any place in Canada. If you want to do a cross-country flight up beside, for example, Stave Lake in this case, a body of water, you notice that there's a Class E from 700 feet off the ground upwards of that. So no matter where you are, give them a call at the local airports, find out the activities in the area because they may be practicing water bombing for fires, or they may actually really be doing water bombing for fires. So here you are, you're on a cross-country day, you're ready to get out and enjoy yourself, but you're just not quite sure about the edge of where your CYA is, so you can look that up on SkyVector, and then you're also wondering what might be happening in the area. Well, if you can't get a hold of any of the airports in the area, it's best to talk to one of the paragliding schools and find out what's up. Okay, so I'm just going to use the edge of Stave Lake here for an example. Say, for example, it's a really great day, you're out, you're getting lots of height, you want to enjoy seeing this area, you've never been there before, but you want to see what's happening with the airspace first. Okay, so we have our hangar. We have made every call that we possibly can, and you have done your homework. So you want to fly in this area and you just need a little bit more information that you feel. Well, guess what? Here it is, the Canadian Airspace Viewer. This is fantastic for another tool in your toolbox of cross-country flying. When you get to the website, uncheck all of those boxes on the top left-hand side there, and then only check the E airspace and see only E airspace showing up in your viewer. Okay, so now we know we're in Class E airspace from 700 feet to overlying airspace. This is IFR traffic, no longer VFR traffic. So what that means is IFR, they're primarily flying by instrument flight rules, not visual flight rules. Now we're going to turn off the Class E airspace and turn on the other airspaces to find out what that overlying airspace is. Okay, so here on the top left you can see that we've clicked on the B airspace and it is indicating that from 12,500 feet up to 18,000 feet we are now in Class B airspace. And as indicated, this is the route that planes are using to land in Vancouver. Okay, so let's take a look here. The CYA 186 is from the surface to 6,000 feet. But we know now, by looking at that solid magenta line, that's your borderline of your Class C airspace. Okay, so looking from the top of our CYA upwards, at 6,000 feet it becomes Class C, that's controlled, up to Class B, that starts at 12,500 feet, and that goes up to 18,000 feet, and then you're into Class A, up to 60,000 feet. Now I can hear you asking, why would they put a Class C right above our CYA? Well, ladies and gentlemen, fellow pilots, we happen to have WestJet from Prince George to Abbotsford coming right over top of us at 7,000 feet daily, right down through the valley. Alrighty, that's enough for the Fraser Valley for a while. Let's go up to the Okanagan, specifically North Okanagan. And, well, would you look at that? We happen to have ourselves another CYA. How cool is that? Alrighty, this CYA is called 122AH. Do you remember what the A stands for? And how about the H? Well, would you look at that? This one goes up to 6,200 feet. Again, the rules for Class G airspace apply when the area is active. When not active, the rules for the applicable surrounding airspace apply. And it's a darn good thing they put that CYA there, because without it, you'd only be able to ever go 700 feet above the ground in that area where the shaded magenta line is, because that is Class E airspace. Alrighty, let's jump back onto our Canadian airspace viewer and let's go take a look at our Class F CYA as well as the surrounding airspace in its area. Okay, so here we can see as the CYA is 122 AH, it's Vernon Class F, and it's from the surface to 6,200 feet, as well as we've seen that on SkyVector. Okay, so for the Class E, which is above your CYA, it goes from 6,500 all the way up to 18,000 feet. And you're thinking, hey, if I'm a pilot and I've got my Hagar, I can enter into Class E. That is correct, but one thing I want to make sure you know about, and it's in this video, is there's planes that come through that area, more specifically jet planes. They are flying IFR. They have been known to come down through that valley at 7,000 feet and upwards of that on their way and descending into Kelowna. So the main point being at this point is if you're wanting to cross the valley from King Eddie to the Lumby Ridge, please stay inside the CYA. Okay, and we're now going to plot an XC course from Mara to Lumby. Okay, so when you first start looking at doing cross-country flights, you're going to want to take Google Maps or Google Earth and zoom into the area in which you want to fly. Get a really good understanding of the topography, and then, of course, we're going to look at the airspace as well. Okay, so this is one route that we're looking at when you have a very light west or southwest wind, helping the thermals up the side. We're also going to look at another route possible. And I'm sure you've pretty much guessed it, that on a light east wind day, you're going to want to come around the east side of Silver Star to make your way back to Lumby. Again, this has to be a pretty big lift day, because you don't want to land in the back there. You need the height to get up and over. And here's a view facing south of what it looks like in regards to the topography. Gives you a bit better idea. Go on to Google Earth, take a look around. Okay, so we go into SkyVector, and the first thing we notice is that leaving Mara, we're pretty much going to be immediately entering into Class E airspace. Now take a look where the white arrow is, and you can see that again, we are dealing with Class E from 700 feet off the ground upwards. Okay, so for some points of interest along your flight path, when you get to the purple arrow area, that is the Enderby Cliffs. You want to make sure some good height is obtained there so that you can make it across the Enderby Gap, which is the orange arrow. At the red arrow, that's indicating where you're leaving one E airspace and entering into another. We're going to show you that shortly. And the green arrow is where you're entering back into the CYA, into Lumby. Okay, here we are again, back onto the Canadian Airspace Viewer. I'm now going to click that E button on the top left corner, and now we've got our airspace back in view of our Class E in the route that we're about to fly. We notice by hovering our mouse over top of the launch site at Mara, as soon as we launch, we're into Class E airspace, starting at 2,200 feet above ground level, going upwards to 18,000 feet. As you scroll your mouse down across the page, you can realize now that you go into that 700 foot to overlying airspace area. We scroll down a little farther and we now realize that we're in an RNAV route, Class E, 2,200 feet above ground level to 18,000 feet. You may be asking yourself, is traffic in this area? The answer is yes. We will show you that very shortly. And finally, once we arrive down into the CYA area again, we realize that the surrounding airspace is normally 2,200 feet above ground level to 18,000 feet, Class E. Okay guys, so there are some plane and helicopter traffic routes in the area that you will need to be aware of that are occupying Class E airspace. So questions. What area are they coming through? What height will they be coming through at? And what times of the day are they coming through at? Good questions. Okay, so the first example we see here is WestJet's flight route from Alberta comes into the valley in where we are flying at about 9,000 feet, and this is daily on their way to Kelowna. Once they get down near the end of the valley by the King Eddie launch site, normally they're about 7,500 feet Another flight path as well that's extremely common and used quite often that also puts him above King Eddie at 7,500. And as we've seen earlier on the Canadian Airspace Viewer, here's another WestJet flight route from northern Alberta. At 10,000 feet, they come across the top of Silver Star and again heading down towards Kelowna. Okay guys, so now we're getting near the end of the video. I just wanted to put in one last section here, and it's got to do with rotor, wash, and vortices. Some people may be asking, what the heck is that and why would it be important to us? Well, good questions. It's primarily because we will be sharing the airspace with these other aircraft. In the case of a helicopter, it's important that you know that the rotor wash goes down, out to the side, and behind the aircraft. So after you've seen the helicopter go through, just remember that those vortices created by the rotor and that wash can continue to remain there for quite some time after he's gone through. If you notice the helicopter's landing, just remember when he's stationary, his wash will now be going out in all directions. Now let's just talk for a moment in regards to how this might affect you when you're flying on a cross-country flight. There may be a fire way more than 10 kilometers away from you, but what we're looking for now is what water source will that helicopter be using to put out that fire, and is our cross-country flight in the way of that? In this example, we see a fire easily 20 kilometers south of us, yet on our flight path there's a chance that the helicopter may want to come through our area to get to that water, which seems to be the closest water to his area. The point here is, if he's going to use water from Maple Lake, we do need to stay out of the area in which he's going to need to work. Now, even though we are inside of our CYA at this point, this could be a interesting situation. So if there's any doubt and you're wondering what his path would be, you can monitor the frequency that he is on, or you can call the local airport before launching. Alrighty guys, well I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more, by all means like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you back on another video on my channel, hopefully really soon.